Grand afternoon. Why some need me to be dumb, wrong, and stupid. Um, the second video on the new DRC GB News channel that I've set up because my other channel, the other channel, the DRC channel, has been taken down. This will be the second video on it, and I'm imagining that because of its description, the first video that I did, some people may be wondering what news is in that now. But you will notice that notice made reference to Charles III, identifying him as the head of the corporation, and how the UK Crown and its agents and enforcers of its policies that support a, I can't read my own handwriting here. I've decided to take some notes, by the way, just to make some notes before, so it gives me an idea of what it is I want to talk about. And its agents have maintained or manufactured a framework of systems that undermine the divine, natural, and common law, thereby the inalienable rights of living women, men that are organic, indigenous, and aboriginal, as an example. So, although that's news for me, particularly as an example. Again, Charles has popped up in the news today. He's in hospital, not for anything major, but it seems as though his treatment's going well for his prostate cancer. But more importantly, not many people know, or maybe people do know, that Charles II assumes the rights of every living man, woman, and child on these islands, and actually across the Commonwealth, and assumes that they are incompetent and imbecile, and therefore he knows what's best for us. So he decides, he and his government, the UK Crown Corporation, and the policies and the legal framework that they've established over hundreds of years, and have refined to suit their ends, is there to manage us, if you like, or to govern us in allegedly our best interests. So that notice that I put up is saying a number of things. It says who I am as a living person, a living sovereign, indigenous and aboriginal and organic living man, who does not subject themselves to the will of essentially a third-party interloper and foreigner. He's here, and his cronies are here doing business, allegedly offering good service, and they've not been doing. And it violates, as I say, divine, natural, and common law. Yeah. So, and that gives you a bit of an insight, I'd like to believe, into why it is that he got a £45 million wage rise. So, which indicates that he's doing a job, and we're paying him for this job. And part of his wage increase is £45 million, even though he raised a lot of money by assuming not only the rights but also the land rights to the islands, to the coastline of the UK, of England. So that means that he's been paid a hell of a lot of money for by allowing wind turbine companies, as an example, to rent the land to stick their pylons on and spinning things to generate electricity. So he's getting paid for that. And there's been some talk about how he might be able to return some of this money or um, share some of the proceeds with the British people. Isn't that interesting? So there's an anomaly there for me. There's more than an anomaly there. It's fraud as far as I'm concerned. And I've made it clear that I'm aware of the fraud. I'm aware of who the king is. I know who I am, and I know what you've been doing, i.e. the Charles III. As a descendant of Vlad the Impaler, by the way, go check it out. It's not I write it. And check out who Vlad the Impaler was. And it will give you an insight into his personality, not just of him, but the whole family, being parasitic, vampirish type behavior. Very parasitic, very vampirish. Okay. So that's my first sort of bit of news, if you will. And I'm trying to make the news relevant to whom? Well, I'm presenting the news, the fundamentals of the news, what's going on, and how that relates to indigenous and Aboriginal people, or those people that consider themselves to be indigenous and Aboriginal, and those who don't. So I'm making it relevant so that you can see the links and the connections between, say, what's going on at the moment in real time, fundamental stuff that's going on either in the financial markets or, as an example, or geopolitically, and making it relevant to indigenous and Aboriginal peoples. I suppose that's one way of looking at it. So, as an example, David Lammy today, I think it is, or yesterday, has just told Israel that there's they won't no longer license weapons, that's my understanding of it, to basically stop the Palestinians. I was going to swear, it sounds more dramatic if I swore, but they're saying that no more weapons for you, or so that you can fuck over the Palestinian women, children, and men. And Mr. Netanyahu is not happy about this and said that it's a shameful, quote unquote, a shameful act for Britain to do such things, considering that it's a shameful act not to support Israel in defeating our common enemies. It throws up a lot of questions for me about, one, why the shift, the shift in approach to Israel from the UK, because a lot of our taxpayers' money has been going into supporting Israel. And actually, as an example, Suella Braverman's husband is considered to be, he's got dual citizenship for a start, and I suspect that Suella has as well. And part of that is dual citizenship is to Israel. Would consider himself a Jew, a Zionist Jew. But just to sort of say that the government has been in full support of Israel. And so I'm curious about the shift, why they might not be supporting them any further, and whether or not there's any truth in it in any case. Now, what's that got to do with indigenous peoples? Well, the support for Israel as a group, Israel came into existence in 1957, as it is now. The Balfour Agreement in 1947, I believe it was, straight after the war, was acknowledged, if that makes sense, because the agreement was had been agreed from the early 1900s, 1913, to be roughly where I remember that an arrangement had already been set up so that after the Second World War, Britain that had, I think Egypt had was a protectorate of that area, commonly known as Palestine, and the Brits were a directorate of Egypt. So after the Second World War, that's why there was a war between Egypt and I think it was Israel, but it was actually fought really with British troops, because there was a lot of resistance to the idea of the Balfour Agreement being enacted, i.e. this establishment of Israel, by a group of people who weren't from that region, actually originated in the Caucasus Mountains. Benjamin Netanyahu, as an example, his descendant C is part Hungarian, as an example. I'm not saying he's not a Jew, but I'm just saying he's Hungarian. So what they're doing down in Palestine, God only knows. And it's not just God that only knows, we know. So what that means in real terms, if it's biblical, I suppose, because they talked about the war to end all wars, and that's where it's supposed to be taking place. I do know that that one of the things that conflict does, it links very much to the stock market insofar as the largest amount of money that is traded on the stock market comes through arms. War is good for economies, and it's good for making money. It's massive. It's a massive industry, and it also, but it's not the biggest, not by any stretch. I won't want to go into what the biggest is, but war is important. If there's no war, people aren't making money. They're not creating strife and creating mischief and mayhem around the globe, creating conflicts, which also then leads to disruptions in those countries. That means their GDP goes down, the cost of living goes down in those countries, and then it encourages migration to areas of the world where allegedly there is a better standard of living and there's an easier way of earning a living, and you can make some money and bring it back to your home country and get a life, basically. But one of the things that we're missing is the fact that what we are calling migration, immigration, and illegal immigration is not by accident, it's by design. People are only fleeing the countries and wanted to come here for a better life, as it were, because the countries that they're coming from have been destroyed, and usually, or there's been mischief and mayhem within those countries. They've become dictators that are supported by Western countries, particularly the Five Eyes. Five Eyes are the UK, the US, France, Germany, no, I beg your pardon, the UK, the US, Australia, New Zealand, and Canada. Those are the Five Eyes, okay? And then on top of that, you've got the G7, and then you've got the G10, G20, and G30, all of which are run out of Davos, essentially. But that's another story. So in some more news, Rachel Reeves seems to be apologised for leaving, for example, pensioners worse off by returning less or taxing even more the contributions made by pensioners, ensuring that the money that pensionable has been the pensionable contributions of pensionable age people now, and those that are getting ready to become pensionable to receive their pension, that they remain in work, or they're making life so difficult that they're not able to get their pensions. The prices, and they're also taxing those contributions that have already intended to tax those contributions already made. Okay, not that, and they've already been taxed once already. There is, and I understand, some talk of inheritance rights for pension, inheritance taxes increasing or reducing. What do I mean by inheritance tax? This is my slant on things. Anything that you're seeking to pass down to the next generation, you know, if you're looking to pass on any assets or wealth to your kith and kin, your family, after working hard, your pensions, whatever it might be, the government is seeking to tax that, or increase the taxes on that. It's called a wealth benefit tax in short. So what that means is that anything that you decide to leave for your descendants is taxable. It was taxable anyway, but they're looking to increase it even more. What's even worse, from what I'm comprehending, is that those people that say bought cheap during the 80s, as an example, bought a 20 or a 30 or a £50,000 house back in the 80s or the 90s, and now the value of that has gone up. Say it's worth £1 million, £1.5 million. The government is proposing that profit that has been made over that period of time, that gets taxed too. And they're looking to scrap, is it tax duty when you're buying a house? They're looking to get rid of that too, or replace it actually with a annual, I think it's 2% charge based upon the value of your house. So even if you've paid for your house, paid it off, you still have to pay for living in that house. Now, people are going to have to be really, really careful about this, because on top of everything else that's gone up in prices, insurances and so on, the returns on the pension, on people's pensions, are not where they're supposed to be. So there's questions that need to be asked, because they seem to know that the returns that are expected for people that are going into retirement, reaching retirement age, is not going. The money's not there. I've been saying this for years. It's not been there for a long time, and that's one of the reasons why local authorities across the country are going bankrupt, because they've taken the state workers, social workers, teachers, and things like that. That's why they're giving them so much money. You know what I mean? That money's going to have to come from somewhere. So we're going to have to pay for it, because the rich aren't going to want to pay for it. The middle classes are not going to want to pay for it, but they're going to have to pay for it, because they're going to be under attack too. Because if you've got a second home, they want to charge you for any profits that you might make out of that. And I know a lot of people that have gone into the rent to buy market as a way of securing their pension. I mean, that's got some serious knock-on effects in terms of housing anyway, but also, again, it's going to, even if you're bought in an affluent area, doesn't mean that you'll be able to stay in that area, and you may have to sell your property, downsizing, and the value of losing lots of money to schemes that are not okay, that impoverish the people and basically put people into debt, put people in debt, poorhouse, if you will. Is it coming? Well, I say, if you look at large conglomerates such as Evergrande, which and there's another one, I can't remember what they're called. They're the biggest retail and commercial investors, BlackRock as well, in the world. You will see that they've been buying a lot of the properties, which means, and they're the ones that are controlling the prices of rent. All the social housing has gone. So that means, it's gone into private hands, you know. So people are being asked to pay for rents that are above, you know, we're talking about 3/4 of income going on rent, not even mortgages, because people, you know, banks aren't issuing mortgages anymore because they can't get a return on as the interest rates get lower. You know, banks aren't making much of a return, and people haven't got the, if you like, jobs or whatever it is to borrow from the banks. So it's a bit of a catch-22 situation that we seem to be finding ourselves in. Where I see it, what's I got to do with indigenous Aboriginal people, is that, you know, this is a collapse of a system that we are seeing, And it also connects to, going back to David Lammy, that in order, so I'm not doing this very well, another fundamental that is taking place on the scene as well, that not many people are talking about, is the BRICS nations and the impact that that's having on the economy. There we go. BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. They're the core BRICS nations, and there are 200 nations that have hooked up with them, and basically they're not trading in the dollar. They are trading in assets such as gold, silver, not so much oil, but oil also, gas, precious metals, what sort of thing, grains, things of that nature. The things that used to be traded along the Silk Road. I'll say no more than that. Go back in history, you know. But all those all money is backed by something other than oil, and also the reserve currency for the world is no longer the petrodollar. The dollar, the US dollar and the euro dollar actually, and they're both struggling at the moment. Don't believe me? Go and have a look on Bloomberg. That's my favourite. Don't understand what's going on, but I just look at the particulars. They're all red at the minute, and the arrows are going down, and they've been going down for a while. There was a big slump a couple of weeks back that seemed to pass people by, but they've propped the market back up again. But it's in such disarray because of what's happening with the BRICS nations. They are trading amongst themselves. They are using their, I don't necessarily understand the meaning of some of this language that I'm about to use, but the bonds and the treasuries, instead of people buying them using dollars, they are using their dollars to buy gold and silver, if that makes sense, and then using that to trade with, and leaving, again, the Five Eyes, the Western countries, in a bit of a pickle financially. It's affecting the stock market. And we're not seeing this, but we are feeling the impacts of the BRICS nations doing their thing, because it makes, if we still try, they won't trade with the West because they're still wanting to use the dollar, the petrodollar. And even the Saudis are not working with the Americans in the same way that they used to inform the market. So that is today's news. I could link it to some more things, actually, some other fundamentals that are going to affect the indigenous and Aboriginal across the globe, because it is the indigenous and Aboriginal across the globe that make up the BRICS nations that are actually stepping away from the Western hegemony. And what we're seeing is the Western hegemony fighting for dear life to hang on to its power base, and its power base and the mechanisms and the structures that it's used to control the world for centuries, and in some instances for millennia. This is not a new thing at the moment. So I'll be saying a little bit more, hopefully, about that in the next podcast. I think I've done a reasonably good job there of bringing in some geopolitical happenings, some local or national news items, and relating them to, I suppose, the everyday experience of we could call them melanated peoples, because it affects everybody, regardless of. When I say melanated peoples, I am talking about anyone. It's everybody, We've just got some that's got lots and lots of melanin, like me, and some people that don't have lots and lots of melanin, like Benjamin Netanyahu, who's got very little. I don't think he's got any, actually, to be quite honest. And can you tell? Behavior, attitude, how much melanin someone has. It's not just about appearance and blue eyes and blonde hair. That's not the only thing you can tell. As someone once said, I can't remember, don't judge a person by what they say. Watch what they do. See if the two match. If they match. If it doesn't, speak with forked tongue. Till the next time, may your ELP and your spirituality remain strong.